Good afternoon. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. Millions of voters went to the ballot box last Sunday for the March 31st local elections. The ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP, received the majority of the votes overall with 44.4%, while the main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, led the race in the three major provinces of Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir.
The hotly contested municipal elections in Istanbul will have to wait for the official announcement of the results by the Supreme Election Board, as both the government and the opposition have claimed victory. Although initial results by the election watchdog show that CHP's Ekrem İmamoğlu was ahead of the government's mayoral candidate, Binali Yıldırım, by around 25,000 votes. According to state-run Anadolu Agency, as of late afternoon of April 1st, the main opposition, Republican People's Party, CHP's nominee İmamoğlu, received 48.79% of the votes, while the ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP's Yıldırım, garnered 48.51, with 99.75% of all citywide ballot boxes having opened and all ballots counted. According to unofficial results, in capital Ankara, CHP's mayoral candidate CHP won landslide victories. The party's mayoral candidate Tunç Soyer, the former mayor of the province's Seferihisar district, was elected as the mayor for the metropolitan municipality by garnering over 50% of the votes. The secular liberal masses of the Aegean province of Izmir have rooted for the CHP, Turkey's first political party, established by modern Turkey founder Mustafa Kemal Atatürk in 1923 for several decades, making it a stronghold of the party. The AKP had nominated former economy minister Nihat Zeybekçi to run for the mayor of Izmir, having received support and endorsement from its ally, the Nationalist Movement Party, MHP. Good Party, the CHP's electoral ally, had not named a candidate for Izmir, endorsing Soyer as part of their nation alliance. Meanwhile, the CHP also won landslide victories in two other Aegean provinces, Aydın and Muğla. Aydın's current first female mayor, Özlem Çerçioğlu, re-ran as the CHP's candidate for the second consecutive term and won the mayoral seat by drawing over 50% of the votes. In Muğla, the incumbent mayor Osman Gürün, renominated by the CHP, was the mayor of the metropolitan municipality. In the previous local elections in 2014, the provincial municipality of Muğla was declared as a metropolitan municipality, and Gürün was elected as the first metropolitan mayor. Besides the Aegean provinces, the CHP also gained electoral triumphs in the southern provinces of Antalya, Mersin, and Hatay, all three which are metropolitan municipalities. Muhittin Böcek, the CHP's candidate for Antalya Metropolitan Municipality, won the mayoral seat by defeating the AKP's candidate Menderes Türel, also the current mayor of the city, with about a difference of 3%. Similarly, Vahap Seçer, the CHP's candidate for Mersin Metropolitan Municipality, was elected as mayor of the province. Meanwhile, the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, HDP, retained its stronghold cities, including the three metropolitan municipalities of Diyarbakır, Mardin, and Van, but lost a few others to the AKP, such as Bitlis, Muş, and Ağrı. In Diyarbakır, the HDP candidate for mayor got 63.2% of the votes, compared to 30.7% won by AKP candidate Cumali Atilla, a bureaucrat appointed by the government 2.5 years ago. Finally, in Tunceli, the Communist Party of Turkey, TKP, won a surprise victory over the HDP.
The ruling AKP issued an appeal to the Supreme Board of Elections for a recount of invalid votes in some districts of Istanbul, claiming there were irregularities when registering and counting the votes.
Districts was not approved by the Supreme Election Board on the grounds that it won't bring about a change to the results. AKP deputy leader Fatih Şahin said his party will carry the results from 25 districts to a higher appeal mechanism. We will, of course, accept the results, Şahin said.
Joining us now is Sinan Ülgen, who is a former Turkish diplomat and the current head of the Center for Economics and Foreign Policy Studies in Istanbul. Good afternoon, Mr. Ülgen. Welcome to This Week in Turkey.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
So the widespread view after Sunday's critical vote is that the results were a major setback for the AKP, even though it garnered the majority of the votes overall with 44.4%. The main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, has taken Ankara and Istanbul, even though the vote recount is still underway for Istanbul. And it has also taken a number of other important provinces such as Adana and Mersin. And as you also wrote in your recent op-ed in The Guardian, the opposition is now in command of the cities that make up 65% of Turkey's GDP. So my first question to you is, how do you explain this landslide victory by the CHP?
Well, it's a victory by the CHP-led alliance, let's say, which also includes E-Party and got also the support in many of the metropolitan cities of the pro-Kurdish HDP. But let me go one step back and try to analyze the main parameters, the main factors that have led to this outcome. I think the first criteria to mention is that these elections were held quite uncharacteristically for Turkey against the background of an economic recession. So, you know, Turkey has indeed entered a recession, the first of its kind for over a decade now, and therefore economic concerns came to the fore. And this obviously has had an impact on voting behavior. So I tend to think that this was one of the major factors that explain the outcome last Sunday. The second factor is what you have also mentioned in your introductory remarks, and that is that the opposition this time around, an opposition that was, you know, belittled for long for being ineffective and fragmented, has this time around performed rather well. And here there are at least, you know, three different arguments to be made. The first one is that when we look at the voting behavior within each alliance, namely the AK Party-led alliance and the CHP-led alliance, the voting performance of the CHP-led opposition alliance was substantially better. What I mean by that is that the E-Party voters who were part of that alliance tended to vote wholesale for a CHP candidate in a city, and vice versa. The CHP constituency voted for an E-Party candidate. That was not necessarily the case for the government-led alliance, the AK Party-MHP alliance, where we did see a split, at least for the MHP voters. That's particularly the case in Ankara, where the new mayor, Mansur Yavaş, seems to have won more of the MHP share than the AK Party candidate. So there are differences in terms of how each alliance performed in terms of bringing their constituency to vote for their own candidate. The second point is that beyond the E-Party CHP formal alliance, the tactical nature of the pro-HDP Kurdish voters was also a factor, to the extent that HDP did not field candidates in some of the big cities and essentially appealed their constituency to go out and vote for the opposition alliance. That mattered more in cities like Istanbul and Mersin, for instance. And then the final factor, as it relates to opposition, is that particularly in Ankara and Istanbul, but that's also the case in Adana and Antalya and some others, they fielded quite successful candidates. We have seen both İmamoğlu and Mansur Yavaş being able to reach above and beyond their natural constituency. İmamoğlu, for instance, was able to draw a share of the conservative vote in Istanbul. Likewise for Mansur, who, as I stated, did split the nationalist vote, the MHP vote. So the performance of the candidates themselves is also a factor. So I think when this is really the background dynamics that explain the outcome on Sunday.
As you know, Mr. Ülgen, the ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP, issued an appeal to the Supreme Board of Elections for a recount of invalid votes in some districts of Istanbul, suggesting that there were some irregularities about the voting and the counting process. The recount still continues in Istanbul, and we hear that a new appeal is being made for Ankara. And there has also been a war of words in the context of Istanbul between Yıldırım and İmamoğlu as to who really has won the race. So what do you think is the reason of this unclarity?
Well, I think from the AK Party's perspective, losing Istanbul came as a surprise more than losing Ankara. Essentially because before the elections, every single poll that we saw gave a clear advantage to Mansur Yavaş in Ankara. But the race was very close in Istanbul. The outcome was unclear. The margin was always, by and large, within the margin of error of the polls that we saw. So, first of all, it was, from our party's perspective, an unexpected loss. Secondly, this is a symbolic loss in the sense that both in Ankara and in Istanbul, the political tradition represented by AK Party had held on to those cities for the past 25 years, since 1994. So it's a change that comes after 25 years of being in power in local government, and you know, that's a factor. Thirdly, there's also another degree of symbolism in the sense that the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's political travel started in Istanbul when he won, surprisingly, in 1994, the local race in Istanbul. He built his career on top of being the successful mayor of Turkey's largest city. And finally, Istanbul itself is the cornerstone of the Turkish economy. It is the beating heart. In itself, it represents close to 30% of Turkish GDP, and concomitantly, the municipality has one of the largest public budgets in Turkey. So losing Istanbul also means will also be detrimental in terms of access to funding for political action. So that's the reason why it's difficult for any party, including a party, to lose a place like Istanbul.
And finally, before we change the subject, Mr. Ülgen, what do you think will be the main challenges for the opposition, not only for the opposition, but also for the AKP from this point onwards?
Well, I mean, in general, for the AKP, now the main challenge is the economy. This is really, now that the elections are over, hopefully in a few days when all the results will be finalized. There are no elections for another 4 years. So Turkey has the political space to really address now its urgent problem of redressing the economy, where there is a need for deep and fundamental reforms that are not only economic in nature, but these reforms will need to take place in areas like the rule of law as well, if the economy is to be redressed. So I think from AK Party's vantage point and from the government's vantage point, this is the immediate challenge. For the opposition, the challenge will be to take over the municipalities and to implement, at least to basically start service delivery in a way that can go, that can surpass the standards of service delivery that were set by the previous mayors, and in particular in Ankara and in Istanbul. So there will be a challenge to do that in an environment where central authority belongs to a different political movement. So there might be issues around how much budget shall be allocated to these cities that are now being held by the opposition. So in summary, these are the main challenges that I would like to outline.
Mr. Ülgen, before we shift our focus and move on to start talking about the ongoing crisis between Turkey and the US regarding the S-400 missile systems and also the F-35 fighter jets, let's take a small break now, and we'll be back with you in the studio shortly. And now we'll continue with our next news video.
The US warnings came on Wednesday as Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu was in Washington to attend the 17th anniversary of the founding of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Pence, speaking at NATO Engages, cautioned Ankara about proceeding with its repeatedly stated intent to acquire the S-400s. Pence said Turkey must choose between remaining a key NATO member or risk the security of that partnership by making such reckless decisions. Turkey's Vice President Fuat Oktay replied Pence on Twitter, saying that the United States must choose about whether to remain allied with Ankara. He raised the contentious relationship of US support for Kurdish forces in Syria, accusing Washington of joining forces with terrorists. Earlier that day, at the same conference with Pence, Çavuşoğlu had once again affirmed Turkey's intention to purchase the S-400s. It's a done deal, Turkey's foreign minister affirmed. Later on, Çavuşoğlu met with US Foreign Secretary Pompeo, who warned of the potentially devastating consequences of unilateral Turkish military action in northeast Syria. Pompeo also expressed his concerns about Turkey's potential acquisition of the S-400s, while he complained about Ankara's arrest of US citizens, urging a swift resolution of those cases involving unjustly detained Americans. The Turkish Foreign Ministry then issued a statement disputing the State Department account, claiming the US summary was obviously prepared before the meeting, while it fails to reflect the content of the meeting and contains matters that were not even raised. Like Pence and Pompeo, Congressman Eliot Engel and Michael McCaul also cautioned Çavuşoğlu about Turkey's planned S-400 purchase. Turkey's government must choose to demonstrate its continued commitment to the NATO alliance, the congressman warned. Meanwhile, on Monday, the Pentagon took its first retaliatory step and stopped the delivery of F-35 fighter jet parts and manuals to Turkey. However, so far, Turkish pilots continue to train on the aircraft at Luke Air Force Base outside Phoenix, Arizona. Pentagon leaders say there's still hope for some type of negotiated settlement.
Welcome back, Mr. Ülgen. So as we've just heard in the previous news video, the S-400/F-35 crisis seems to be Turkey's first foreign policy test after Sunday's local elections, and the recent meeting between Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu and his US counterpart Mike Pompeo signals that it may not be solved so easily at this point. What do you think?
Indeed, this certainly shapes up as one of the most important and critical milestones in the next few months regarding Turkish foreign policy. This issue definitely incorporates a potential for escalation between Turkey and the United States, which would then have an impact not generally on Turkey itself, but also on the cohesion and integrity of the NATO alliance.
And Mr. Ülgen, assuming that this crisis escalates, what do you think will be the consequences, not only for Turkey, but also for the US and NATO?
Well, I mean, we certainly, our first hope is that policymakers both in Ankara and Washington will find a way not to essentially preempt such an escalation. But indeed, if we do witness an escalation, then this is bound to have a number of important consequences for the bilateral relationship. Because the way that escalation would unfold would be that the US, and so far that's been the threat, that the US would essentially sanction Turkey on the basis of the CAATSA sanctions, which is the countering of America's adversaries through Sanctions Act, a bill that was passed in Congress back in August 2017, targeting Russia. And part of that bill has a number of Russian companies active in the military industry that are under sanction, and third parties that do business, that do transactions with those companies can then be targeted by US sanctions. That will be the case if Turkey purchases the S-400, because the manufacturer of the S-400 system is one of the sanctioned Russian companies. So CAATSA sanctions in itself is going to have a considerable impact. because this will be between two NATO allies, two important partners of NATO, where the lead partner, the United States, would have a sanctions regime against another NATO ally, and that's certainly quite peculiar. It would also undermine Turkey's risk image abroad, being seen as being under U.S. sanctions. There are a number of different measures under those sanctions. We still don't know which particular measure will be applied. There are about 12 categories of sanctions that can be applied, from light to heavy. The administration will choose at least 5 of those, so we'll be able to talk a bit more concretely once we know what the specific measures shall be. But we should also bear in mind that administration could at any time upscale the sanctions. So even if they start with lighter sanctions over time, this may become more difficult. So that's the cuts-up part. Then there is also the another part which is linked to the essentially the end of military cooperation projects, in particular the F-35, but not just the F-35. There has been a report submitted by Pentagon to Congress back in December, where it specifies where these type of military cooperation barriers could emerge, which also includes, for instance, spare parts for the F-16 program and so on. So, but the main issue here that has, and for justifiably, caught the attention of the public is the F-35 program. F-35 is a multi-billion, multinational program for the development and production of fifth-generation aircraft. The fifth generation, in the sense, should be viewed as an aircraft that can operate as part of the future of network-centric warfare. So it's not just a type of fighter aircraft that we've known with the F-16s. It's essentially a flying headquarters that can coordinate the tactical area in warfighting. So in that sense, it is also a force multiplier for the armed forces, including in the future the Turkish military. In addition to that, the Turkish military industry is also part of the F-35 program. So far, they have a portfolio of production reaching up to $12 billion. But in addition to that, this is also an area which would allow the Turkish military industry to upgrade its technological skills and to become and to be able to import and also export some of that technology. So in many ways, the fact that there might be an impediment to the delivery of the F-35 to Turkey is going to be a handicap when we consider the national security vision of the Turkish armed forces.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ülgen, for your comments and for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Today, we were joined by Sinan Ülgen from EDAM, who commented on the results of Sunday's local elections, as well as the ongoing S-400 crisis between Turkey and the US. And now we'll continue with our next news video. Turkey's annual inflation rate stood at 19.7% in March, according to the latest data released by the Turkish Statistical Institute.
The Turkstat data showed that the March figure was slightly up from 19.67% in February. On a yearly basis, the biggest price hike was in food and non-alcoholic beverages last month with 29.77%. Miscellaneous goods and services with 27.94%, furnishing and household equipment with 26.98%, recreation and culture with 20.08%, and health with 19.72% were the other main groups where high annual increases realized, the institute said. On a monthly basis, the consumer prices rose by 1.03% in March, with the highest monthly increase at 3.48% in health. The 12-month average hike in consumer prices was 18.70% as of this March. As noted in Turkey's new economy program announced in September 2018, the country's inflation rate target is 15.9% this year, 9.8% next year, and 6% in 2021.
CHP Party Assembly member Professor Yüksel Taşkın commented on the results of the March 31st local elections for Medyascope TV.
Actually, it is first related with the democracy crisis that ruling AKP caused since this system change. However, it was already started with 2013 years suppression of Gezi protests, which had a very just cause. From these times onwards, ruling AKP has been further turning into an authoritarian rule. This is first causing a democracy crisis, but today economy and democracy is strongly interlinked. People who first feel this and people who first suffer are generally living in the metropolitan centers. It's not because they are more educated, which is also a fact, contributing fact, but these people are strongly connected with the rest of the world, especially Western world. Economic interactions are, mostly passing through these people. So they realized they are more inclined to realize the link, strong link between democracy and economic welfare. So just before the referendum, which changed the system in Turkey, we were arguing that the next step is a severe economic crisis. What we have said to the people, what we warned people about, came true. So increasing number of people, including a significantly younger number of people, are realizing the fact that ruling Justice and Development Party is further isolating Turkey. And they are creating a dysfunctional, unproductive system based on being closer to the state resources. Those educated people who actually value meritocracy, who value justice in the market, in the state system, they are increasingly getting alarmed. In these elections, we observed all these negative consequences, but the significant point that has further facilitated this alienation from the AKP is, of course, economic crisis. Further fear of further losses in job market, further fear of devaluation of Turkish lira, all these economic factors which were caused by democracy crisis, of course, convinced increasing number of people. And now the most productive parts of Turkey, those cities who are producing economic welfare of Turkey, significantly voted for CHP, which is not just a protest vote. I'm sure we will be able to protect this vote because the political center of Turkey will be soon changed with these significant demographic changes, I believe. These are not accidental, these are quite permanent, and ceteris paribus, if AKP acts like this, I believe in the next elections we will capture power. Is not just based on an understanding of justice, it is a clear and pure opportunism. Why? Look at Mush, just 500 vote differences between HDP and AKP. All these demands for appeal have been systematically rejected. Look at Balıkesir, Nations Alliance there just lost with an insignificant margin. They are continuously asking for recount. They have been rejected. But in Istanbul, they know that those people who seem to have objected to the outcomes, they clearly know that mathematically they have no chance of winning. They just make people. They expect that people would get tired, fed up with, and people would simply surrender to these pressures. But the more they act unjust, the more we are determined. Despite we are not able to sleep for days, we are more energetic because we have a just cause, and we will actually because of our just cause we are already the winners of this election.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 5 p.m. Goodbye.